As we are living in this weird state that we are, with the rise of Christo-nationalism and this far right Christianity that, at least in our country here in the United States, has really been a major force for decades, if not centuries now. We hear a lot of people talk about the law of God, the law of nature and nature's God. The issue is, they don't seem to actually go to the one person they should be asking about this. They're claiming to be Christians. Wouldn't it be nice to know what Jesus thought about all this? If you are a Christian and you believe that Jesus was the Son of God, that Jesus is the Word of God made flesh, maybe his opinions would matter. This was something he did not stay silent on. He told us that there are two commandments, not only greater than all, but on which all the law and the prophets hinge. Maybe instead of focusing on all the little minor issues, they should be the focus of our faith and practice. Let's talk about the two greatest commandments today as we walk together down creation's path. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie. I'm a non-binary Christopagan Druid, and I'm joined today by my husband.
Hello, I'm Brian. I'm a Christopagan Druid as well. Doug the sous chef.
I like that title for you. I think we should use it more often. Today we're going to be talking about the two greatest commandments. I've thought about starting a Bible study at some point, maybe doing a live stream where we do Bible study together. If you all would be interested in that, do let me know. I think that might be a fun thing for us to do. But before we get started, if you haven't already, maybe consider hitting like and subscribe and follow or whatever the button is on the app that you're listening to us on, because we're creating new content related to topics in Christopaganism and Druidry every day, Monday through Friday. And you don't want to miss any of the topics that we are going to be covering, because there's a lot of really meaty, juicy topics that we're going to be digging into. Some of y'all have made requests, and they're on the docket, and they'll be coming up soon. The two greatest commandments. In Matthew chapter 22, verses 36 through 40, we read the following passage. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And Jesus said to him, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. The second likewise is this, You shall love your neighbor as yourself. The whole law and the prophets depend on these two commandments. Oh, that's powerful. Love of God and love of our fellows. All the law and the prophets depends on these two things, on love. I don't want to harp on this too much, but so much of what I see in the Christian world today is not love. So many of the people who profess to be speaking for Christ are speaking out of anger, out of hatred, out of fear. And fear is the opposite of faith. There is no fear in love, John tells us.
I love how RuPaul summed it up. How the hell can you love somebody else if you don't love yourself?
Yeah.
This goes back to the parable of getting the mote out of your own eye before you help your neighbor with the splinter in theirs.
Yeah.
So many people are filled with self-loathing and self-hatred that, of course, they hate others.
Of course.
I mean, it's just the inverse of this very law and practice.
It is the secret to how the Imperial Church keeps people under control. They focus on little issues of so-called morality and so-called ethics, things that do not have anything to do with the scripture. Now, you can have your own opinions on tax policy, but the official policy of Jesus Christ is render to Caesar the things that are Caesar and to God the things that are God's. So pay your taxes, because that's literally what the question was. Should we pay our taxes to Rome, or should we give our tithes to the temple? And Jesus says, render to Caesar that which is Caesar's. It doesn't talk about what taxes should look like or anything like that. That's personal. That's not a matter of faith. That's not part of our faith. We are told to love, that all of our actions should be rooted in love. In fact, Jesus told us that at the end of days, when everybody is being sorted into the good people on his right and the bad, wicked people on his left, the criteria that we're going to be judged on is how we treated the sick, the hungry, the thirsty, the naked, the homeless, the refugees, and those in prisons.
That's another tool of the Imperial Church and of late stage capitalism, this tool of scarcity and terrifying everybody into there is only 10 units of this thing. Therefore, if you don't get your 9, someone else is going to come along and take 3 of them or something, and therefore, if they take 3, you only have 7 instead of 9. It's BS. The answer is love. You don't have to fear the other person of coming in and taking your stuff.
We make enough food, for example, to feed everyone on Earth
Yeah,
and have leftovers.
and have leftovers.
We make enough food currently, right now, to eradicate hunger. But it is not financially feasible for these companies who care more about line go up, that they're going to make more and more profits from their crops, to feed everyone. So they throw it away. So much of the food that we make goes into landfills because we are not taking care of our fellow people. We are caring more about money. And as Jesus said, you cannot serve 2 masters. You cannot serve God and mammon, God and money.
That's even the greatest shame of it all, is it goes into these landfills rather than being mulched. At least it can be mulched and fed back to the fields to grow new food. But they don't even feed the fields with it. They throw it in the landfills, put other crap into the fields to grow the food.
Because that would hurt the oil industry, and on and on and on. Because the oil industry makes the fertilizer that goes into the fields that makes the food that we're then throwing away, so that we can buy more oil from the oil industry to put more fertilizer into the field, and the cycle continues. Let's just look into this. What is this about? What are we actually being called? What do these 2 laws really mean? Because I think the first one is hardest for us today. Love your God with all your heart, mind, and spirit. We have been tricked by the Imperial Church into thinking of God as something separate from us. God is something way up there, far away, distinct, different, beyond. And it's used in their context to tell us that it is something that we should obey.
Or even worse than that, they try to trick us into turning the Imperial Church into God and creating an idol and false worship.
So many churches or pastors, I can't tell you how many YouTube pastors I see that I am the voice of God. No, sweetie, you're not. None of us are. Sorry.
Yeah, God might be in you, God might be moving through you in the moment, but you are not God.
We talked about that a little bit in our Awen episode. So if you want to dig into that deeper, you can go check out our episode on the Awen where we talk about that. Boom, there's a law, especially a law like this that seems to be for something. Love your God. It's not don't not love your God. Because we usually think of laws in sense of the 10 utterances. Thou shalt not this, thou shalt not that, thou shalt not this. Both of these are positive laws. They're not thou shalt nots.
Yeah.
They're not telling us what not to do. They're prescriptive. Love your God. Love your neighbor. Love. Be active. And so you have to ask yourself, what is this working against? You don't make a law just because it would be nice. Like, we wouldn't pass a law that says, everybody read books. That's a strange law. Because you're not telling people what kinds of books. This is just for reading's sake. It seems generic, but it's not. The very problem that this is aiming at, right in the eye, is from Jesus's day to before to even to ours, people proclaim from on high that you should fear God. Be afraid of God. God is angry, vicious, mean, hateful, spiteful, jealous, and is just looking for a reason to strike you with lightning. Just looking for a reason to strike you down. And this law is aimed directly at that. As the Apostle John reminds us, there is no fear in love.
The second problem it also targets is love is accepting a thing for what it is. It's that acceptance without judgment. We've talked about it before in many other previous episodes. The problem is so many want to not accept God for what God is. God is that they are. I am that I am. That is God. So many want to try to make God into an idol, force God to be male, force God to be female, force God to be neither. God is that they are. Love is accepting. That is such a terrible problem. God is the church. God is this. God is that. It's not accepting God for what they are.
Rabbi Shapiro has this wonderful phrase that It's not indigenous to him, but he roots it into everything that he writes. This idea of God is hamakom tuitenu. God is the place of our aliveness. Now, the word the place, hamakom, comes from Jacob wrestling with God. That God is the place where this wrestling happens. Not the angel that was wrestled with. The place. This arena that we go into where we are struggling with that energy that is God. Tuitenu is probably my favorite word for God ever. It literally means our aliveness. You probably have heard this if you've heard any Hebrew before, l'chaim, to life. That wonderful, like when toast that gets made, l'chaim, to life. Chai, life. Chayot is aliveness. Tuitenu is our aliveness. The very aliveness that we are is God. Because God is not separate from us. God is not beyond us. God is not something out there. God is in all things. I say this both as an animist and as a panentheist. I see those as interchangeable words. Some people don't. I do. God is in the rocks. God is in the trees. God is in the animals, the flowers. God is in the wind. God is in you. God is in me. God is in the waves and in the ocean. God is in the rivers and in the mountains and in the stars in the sky and in the great blackness between them. God is in all things.
Because if all of creation is God exploring God, then it is all God.
As the Apostle Paul said on Mars Hill, God is the one in whom we live, move, and have our being. That is God. God is the relationship. God is a verb where what's on both sides of the verb is at the same time the subject and the object. Now, you might not remember your grammar school grammar, so let's break that down for a minute. The subject is the one who's doing the thing, and the object is who's having the thing done to them. So when we say God is love, what we're really saying is our use of love to other things is God. And the love of other things to us is God. We're saying both things at the same time. That's what that means. That's what God is. When we use these verbs for God, God is justice. God is love. God is compassion. God is hope. We're talking about the subject and the object. That connection between those two things, the one who needs justice and the one who dispenses justice. That thing in between them is God. That doesn't mean that justice is always equal, and that does not mean that justice is always done right, because we can commit sacrileges in the name of God where we take to ourselves something that belongs to everyone else, where we act out of bias. And these are the true sacrileges to God and to the divine. Once you start understanding that God is this relationship, this interconnectedness, that God is in all things, is present in all things. God makes the sun shine on the wicked and the just. God makes the rain fall on the wicked and the just. God is not a respecter of persons, because God is isness.
This is also the answer to the question, how can evil be in the world? It's because God is love, and through that love, everyone has been given free will, and some people abuse it.
See, for me, it's even simpler than that. God is love, but many people commit outrages and
Oh, yeah.
sacrileges against love.
Yes.
Just because God is love does not mean that love is ever present everywhere in the world. God is ever present in the world. And this is why we are called to bring perfection to this world. Because not everybody acts out of this right relationship that is God.
Yes.
Because I personally don't believe that God allows anything.
No.
Because God is isness. The idea that your existence is suddenly going to intervene and stop something from happening is kind of weird. And I'm not saying that I don't think that miracles can happen, but that's a whole different aspect of this relationship. It is all about this relationship. From my point of view, and I don't want to knock people like you who do believe in free will, I don't think free will even comes into the question. I don't think God has to allow free will, because if everything is filled with God, then that divine spark just can take action. And the problem is that divine spark is sometimes clouded and hidden and locked in a shell of greed, of pain, of destruction of hate, of bias. And people do not act from that place of divine love.
And it fits in with a lot of the imagery. That's why the imagery uses light, because light, it is there. It shines forth until it is blocked, obfuscated, and obstructed.
I remember talking to a rabbi once because I was very confused about this phrase that's repeated throughout the story of Exodus. And God hardened Pharaoh's heart. This makes no sense to me. If God is trying to free his people, and Pharaoh is even remotely thinking about freeing the people, why would God harden his heart? Does he just want to punish them thoroughly? Because this, from the evangelical tradition that I came from, that's the explanation. Well, they hadn't been truly punished yet. So God had to keep Pharaoh from saying yes.
They had 10 more whoopings coming.
Yeah, they had more whoopings on the way. And that makes no sense to me. And then he just looked at me and smiled and said, well, God was as active in Pharaoh as he was in Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. When Pharaoh chose to turn his heart away from freeing people, that was as much God hardening his heart as him hardening his own heart. It's saying the same thing. And I was dumbfounded. Little teenager me just plopped back in my chair and had that moment of, oh, I'd never thought about that before. Because that's why bad things happen. We all have the abilities of God to create, to destroy, to bring cataclysm and calamity, or to bring synergy and allurement, to bring things together or to break things apart. We all have these abilities within us. Sometimes we have to bring calamity. Sometimes we're doing bad things. I know I've had some very destructive behaviors in my own life. They came out of habitual activities that I had to break. I had to shatter my own life before I could put the pieces back together. Sometimes I like to think of calamity as always a bad thing, but that is what we are called to do sometimes. And when people are not acting out of those places of justice, out of those places of love, out of those places of compassion, then that destructive power causes harm and hurt and pain. And that's why the second commandment is there. It's not just about loving God, this abstract idea of this force moving throughout the universe, this one life that connects us all, but we have to love our neighbor as ourselves. Why are these together? Because they're the same thing. If I am loving my neighbor as myself, I am loving God with all my heart, mind, and spirit. Because my neighbor is part of God. God is in my neighbor, and my neighbor is in God. And whether my neighbor are the trees, the river, the mountain, the people that live next door, the country that neighbors us, what have you, whatever our neighbor is, God is as much in them as in me. And so these really are the same commandment. It's saying the same thing twice. This is what we don't want to see. This is what the Imperial Church does not want us to see. We have to have original sin if we're the Imperial Church. Because if we don't have original sin, then empire cannot do what it wants to do to other people, to rob and steal and oppress. If we don't have a evil permeating the world, then how can we justify extracting brutally materials from people, from the land, and colonizing it and forcing it to our will? That's what the Imperial Church wants. It wants us to deny this basic fact that God is in you, God is in me, God is in nature. We can find sacredness and grace in all of these places. We have to move away from that and not love our neighbor as ourselves. We have to have others. Notice there are no others in this conversation.
Yeah, it's a distraction tactic. It keeps the individual busy worrying about the other so that they don't self-reflect, so they don't take that opportunity to take the mote out of their own eye. Going back to that again.
And worse, so that they feel that they have a sense of power.
Mm-hmm.
Why are people so worried about helping refugees? Because what if they take something from me?
Yeah.
What if they take my job or my money or what have you? It's selfishness. It's closing ourselves off. It's building that shell. It's hardening our hearts. Jesus told us that we will be judged by how well we treat the refugees, how well we treat those in prison. Well, they're just being punished for doing bad things. No, that's not what we're called to do. We're called to visit them, to help them, to rehabilitate them to the best of our ability, to make life better for everyone.
We're called to teach by example. It reminds me of the story that I like to share from an experience in my own life, helping a person in their recovery from drug addiction. There's in two distinct stories that stick out, but in both of them, I had to start with myself and lead as an example. So I had to show that trust. I had to teach them trust and teach them they could open up by myself, trusting and opening up and allowing them to be in my life, knowing full well that I put myself at risk because they have bad habits, they make bad choices, they already demonstrated this, but I had to have that faith to take that step to show them so they could trust and open up. And of course, I constantly was proving I wasn't heedless in it. To go back to yesterday's thing, I wasn't mindless in it. I was going through the five powers. I was going through all the steps, but I trusted them. I opened up. I brought them in. I gave them an opportunity to reintegrate into society. I demonstrated to them how to act with compassion, how to act with love, because that's how I would want to be treated. Because the first thought was like, well, Lord, if I had gone through that experience, how would I want to be treated? How would I react when treated in that way? And for one of them, he chose in the end to fully integrate. And the other one chose not to. And I had to take that hard step. Going back just earlier, we were given that power of creation and destruction. I had to do that step of destruction and separate. And through that separation, yes, they spiral. But I kept an eye on their spiral. I watched them as they went through that last bit. It was a difficult journey for them, but it was a process they had to go through to learn. They got themselves into rehab. And the next time around, they had the lessons they learned from before and were able to successfully go through that journey. And now even they have gone about better in their life. It's that teaching. I had to be that example. And I had to treat them how I wanted to be treated, but I also had to start with myself.
That's not about yelling at people. That's not about condemning people. That's not about being hateful or spiteful, fearful or jealous. It is about being wise. It is about being cautious and careful and all of those things. But it's never, ever forgetting the humanity of the other. Or even deeper than that however you're treating these people is how you're treating God. One of my favorite stories of San Luis Dor is he had been moved to a new mission. When he got there, outside the church on the cold night was a leper, coughing and dying. He was a big ox of a man. He was over 6 foot tall in the 1700s, and a big ox of a man. And he picked him up. He kicked in the doors of the church because he was holding this frail man in his arms and couldn't get to the doors. And he shouted to everyone in the church, "Make way for Jesus Christ." He carried him down the church and laid him on the altar and brought him water, brought him food, brought him blankets. And when people were shocked that he would desecrate the altar with this sick, dying vagabond, he looked at them and said, "How can you not look in the face of any who are suffering and not see your Lord on the cross? This is Christ crucified in front of us, and it is our job to bring him comfort, and if we can, heal." And that is what we are all about. That is the solution to this problem. That is what this law is teaching us. We must love one another as ourselves, because in so doing, we love God with all of our heart, mind, and spirit. This is how we live the two great commandments. This is how we bring about the better world and do the work of restoration in this world that it so desperately needs. It's not easy.
It's not. The next time you find yourself in that difficult situation, the first question to ask yourself is, how do you want to be treated if you were in the other person's shoes?
And be honest
and
about
be
it.
honest about it. When you're about to make this choice, go, how would I want to be treated if I were in their position and someone else was in your role making that decision?
This is why I like to remind people of both the gold and the silver rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and do not do to others what you do not want them to do to you. Or as Rabbi Hillel said it, what you find hateful, do not do that to others. If we just followed the gold and silver rules, this would be a lot easier.
Yeah.
How do we want to be treated? And how would we not want to be treated? I don't want to be left out in the cold. And I think anybody who tells you that they would rather be left out on the cold to die is lying, either to you or to themselves so that they can lie to you.
Yeah. Because that is a tricky thing with it. Like, when I'm out of line, I would want to be called out for being out of line. I wouldn't want to be nagged by it. I wouldn't want to have it rubbed in my face or to be beat like a dog because of it. But I would still want to be called out. I would want to have that opportunity to correct that behavior, to make that change and to do better.
So, how are you practicing these two great commandments? Have you been practicing them like we've been talking about in this kind of animistic, pantheist way? Is that new for you? And if it is, how might it have affected your way of understanding things? Let me know. I would love to find out. You can let us know in the comments. If you're listening to us on YouTube or Spotify, you can leave a comment right there. If you're anywhere else, they do not send us notifications, so we will not know. You can leave a comment there, but then copy that comment and head over to creationspaths.com and click on chat and paste that comment there as well so that we can see it and respond to it and talk to you about it. Because I would love to know how you employ this, how you bring this into action. How do you go through the 5 steps of the 5 powers that we talked about yesterday with these commandments and with this idea of love and compassion for everyone and everything? Well, you're over at creationspaths.com. If you have a few dollars you can pass our way, you can join a membership over there. Or if you want to support us other places, you can find me on Ko-fi and Patreon. I am C. Dorset on both. That helps us to keep the lights on, keep food on our tables, and keep this content coming for you. You're not giving to the Lord. You're just helping us make ends meet. If you have somebody that you think would like what we're doing, please share either the podcast or this particular episode with them. It really does help us out a lot to get the word out about what we're doing and help us to continue to grow. Thank you so much for your time. And as always, may the blessings of the one life flow through you so that you may see the glories of God in everyone and everything that you encounter throughout your day, that you will know that you are living in God's kingdom and constantly surrounded by that marvelous and glorious light. Amen.
Amen.